Good news of a complex and negotiated variety has emerged from the protracted and often contentious stalemate between the United States government and the Chinese technology conglomerate ByteDance, offering a probable reprieve from an existential threat for the short-form video platform, TikTok, and its immense community of over 170 million regular users in America. This development, while framed as a corporate restructuring, is in essence a geopolitical settlement, a carefully architected compromise born from years of suspicion, legislative action, and economic interdependence, suggesting that the platform, a ubiquitous pillar of modern digital culture, will not face an outright ban or a forced shutdown within the borders of the world's largest economy. The announcement made on a Thursday by ByteDance, the Beijing-based parent company and progenitor of the TikTok phenomenon, revealed the signing of definitive, binding agreements with a consortium of three influential and deeply established financial and technological entities from the American investment sphere, a move designed explicitly to create a new operational and governance structure for the application within the United States through the formation of a specialized joint venture. This strategic maneuver, painstakingly negotiated over many months and under the intense scrutiny of multiple executive branch, agencies, and congressional committees, is fundamentally a defensive and preemptive action. A corporate reinvention conceived to navigate around and ultimately nullify the looming specter of a comprehensive federal prohibition that has hung over the company since the final year of the previous administration, representing what numerous analysts and stakeholders within the technology sector are cautiously describing as the most significant and concrete step toward resolving a paralyzing period of uncertainty that has hampered long-term planning, chilled investment, and created anxiety among the platform's vast creator economy and its commercial partners. The agreement, if it successfully clears the remaining procedural and oversight hurdles, stands as a definitive milestone, perhaps even a watershed moment not merely for this specific application but for the broader and increasingly fraught relationship between global technology platforms' national security imperatives and data sovereignty, illustrating a potential blueprint, however imperfect and uniquely contingent for how a consumer technology product with profound cultural reach but contentious ownership origins might continue to operate across the fissures of a digitally bifurcating world where the flow of information and the architecture of algorithms are now treated as core matters of state interest and strategic concern. The narrative of TikTok as operational jeopardy in the United States is not a recent invention, but rather a chronic geopolitical subplot that formally commenced in the late summer of 2020, during a heated presidential election season and a period of sharply escalating tensions between Washington and Beijing across trade, technology, and regional influence. It was then that President Donald J. Trump, utilizing the emergency economic powers granted under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act and citing recommendations from the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, issued a series of executive orders that declared TikTok, alongside the Chinese super app WeChat, to be national security threats, alleging that the vast and granular data collected on American citizens, their browsing habits, location, histories, facial biometrics, social connections, and personal preferences could be compulsorily accessed by the intelligence and security services of the Chinese Communist Party under the country's expansive national security laws, thereby creating an unacceptable vulnerability. The initial directive demanded that ByteDance divest itself completely of any assets or property that enabled the operation of TikTok within the United States, effectively mandating a full sale to American owners, a process that briefly saw competitive interests from software giant Oracle in partnership with retail behemoth Walmart, though that specific transaction ultimately collapsed amid legal challenges and shifting political winds. Although that initial ban was subsequently blocked and entangled in a web of federal court injunctions on First Amendment and procedural grounds, the action established an enduring and bipartisan precedent in Washington, a deep-seated institutional suspicion of software platforms engineered and ultimately controlled by corporations subject to the jurisdiction and legal dictates of a strategic rival, transforming TikTok from a mere social media competitor into a persistent focal point of policy debate and legislative action. The specific contours of the newly announced joint venture deal align precisely with the framework of a plan that first entered the public domain in September of the following year, a plan that emerged concurrently with a critical political intervention wherein President Trump, having returned to office, moved to suspend the enforcement of the aggressively worded Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary-Controlled Applications Act that had been passed by Congress earlier in the year. That legislation had established a stark ultimatum. ByteDance was compelled to divest its U.S. operations in their entirety by a statutory deadline of January the 19th of the following calendar year, or face the inevitable consequence of TikTok being made unavailable on all application stores and internet hosting services within the United States, a digital death sentence. The president's postponement of this enforcement, coupled with his public endorsement of the nascent joint venture framework, signaled a pivotal shift from a posture of uncompromising confrontation to one of negotiated settlement, with Trump explicitly stating that the proposed structure appeared to satisfy the core legislative intent of severing operational control and data access from foreign adversary influence, even if the technical ownership percentages differed from a pure clean sale divestiture. In a confidential internal memorandum circulated to TikTok's global workforce, the company's chief executive officer, Shou-Zi Chew, articulated the corporate perspective on this resolution, framing it not as a retreat but as a strategic evolution securing the platform's future. He confirmed the execution of the foundational agreements with the investor consortium, portraying the newly constituted TikTok U.S. joint venture as the guardian of the community's continuity, ensuring that the 170 million Americans who engage with the platform daily would persist as members of a dynamic, interconnected global digital commons, free to discover, create, and share without the looming threat of abrupt platform termination. The ownership architecture of this new entity is its most defining and politically critical feature, a collective of American and internationally based, but U.S.-aligned investors, including the consortium members and certain existing ByteDance stakeholders, will hold a commanding supermajority interest of 80.1% of the equity, while ByteDance itself will retain a significant but decidedly non-controlling minority stake of 19.9%. This precise allocation is not arbitrary. It is a meticulously calculated figure designed to achieve several simultaneous objectives. It provides ByteDance with a substantial ongoing economic interest in the unparalleled success of the American operation, aligning incentives for continued technical support and platform development. More crucially, by diluting ByteDance's voting power and ownership share below the 20% threshold and, more importantly, below the level of any de facto controlling interest as defined by U.S. regulatory bodies like the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States and the Securities and Exchange Commission, the structure aims to legally and persuasively insulate the U.S. operations from foreign adversary control, the very trigger phrase of the enacted legislation. Shou-Zi Chew was at pains to emphasize the operational autonomy this structure would entail, stating that the joint venture would function as a fully independent corporate entity vested with unambiguous and total authority over the most sensitive domains that had sparked the national security concerns in the first instance. This includes, as he detailed, complete stewardship and custodianship of all U.S. user data, end-to-end responsibility for the integrity and security of the content, recommendation algorithms that power the For You feed, autonomous governance over all content moderation policies, and their day-to-day enforcement and sovereign control over the software development lifecycle, including code audits and vetting processes for all updates deployed to the U.S. user base. This proposed firewall of autonomy represents the core concession and the primary remedy to the stated grievances of the U.S. national security establishment. The White House, through its press office and statements from senior advisors, had previously acknowledged in September the general outline of this joint venture pathway, confirming it as the administration's preferred mechanism for resolving the impasse and allowing TikTok to continue its U.S. service, albeit while cautioning that numerous intricate details surrounding governance, compliance verification, and enforcement mechanisms remain to be fully fleshed out and subjected to rigorous, ongoing oversight. Despite this granted autonomy for U.S. operations, Chew concurrently clarified that the broader global apparatus of TikTok would not be wholly dismantled. The international subsidiaries, including the core research and development teams, would persist in managing the holistic worldwide integration of the product's core features and user experience, as well as orchestrating global commercial strategies in areas such as cross-border e-commerce advertising partnerships and brand marketing campaigns that leverage the platform's international scale. This delineation attempts to square a seemingly impossible circle, creating a legally and operationally distinct American entity for security purposes while maintaining enough connective tissue to the global platform to preserve the seamless unified user experience and the economic efficiencies of a scaled global business that users and advertisers have come to expect. The identity of the three cornerstone investors in this consortium is itself a powerful signal of the deal's intended credibility and its embeddedness within the American technological and financial establishment. They are Oracle, the legendary enterprise software and cloud infrastructure corporation co-founded by Larry Ellison; Silver Lake, one of the world's most formidable and technology-focused private equity firms with a storied history of investments in companies like Dell, Skype, and Twitter; and MGX, a sovereign investment vehicle based in Abu Dhabi with a rapidly growing portfolio in the technology and artificial intelligence sectors. This tripartite alliance brings together deep technological capability in secure cloud computing and data management, vast financial resources and sophisticated transactional expertise, and global strategic capital, respectively. Their collective formation of a new legal entity, dubbed TikTok USDS Joint Venture LLC, serves as the vessel for this experiment in platform governance. As detailed in the internal memorandum and corroborated by prior reporting from Reuters and other financial news services, the consortium's aggregate shareholding within the new venture's 80.1% U.S.-controlled block will be 45% divided in equal 15% allocations to each of Oracle, Silver Lake, and MGX, a structure that ensures no single external investor holds a dominant position over the others within the American bloc. This proposed settlement, however, is not without its vehement detractors and profound skeptics in the political arena, most notably from members of the Democratic opposition who had originally championed the more aggressive divest or ban legislation. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, a figure renowned for her stringent stance on corporate power and antitrust issues, voiced intense and morally charged reservations, framing the agreement not as a national security compromise, but as a transfer of profound media influence into the hands of a wealthy, politically connected elite. She argued that former President Trump's motivations were rooted in a desire to exert influence over the informational landscape to shape what the American public sees and does not see, and that this joint venture structure effectively gifted enhanced control over that powerful mechanism to a cadre of billionaire associates and allies, including Oracle's Larry Ellison, a known political supporter. Senator Warren, along with other critics, has demanded full transparency, insisting the American public possesses an unequivocal right to know whether any undisclosed understandings or secret side agreements were struck between the president and the involved parties regarding content data access or future regulatory forbearance in exchange for the favorable treatment of this specific corporate resolution over the statutorily mandated clean divestiture. The complete ownership pie, as delineated in the company's internal communications, is therefore a map of political and economic accommodation, the aforementioned 45% held by the Oracle Silver Lake MGX consortium. An additional 30.1% allocated to a separate class of shares to be held by various trusts and investment vehicles, representing certain pre-existing, largely institutional investors in ByteDance itself, such as General Atlantic, Sequoia Capital China, and Susquehanna International Group, thereby granting them a continued, albeit indirect, economic stake in the U.S. entity's performance. And the residual 19.9% equity stake retained directly by ByteDance Ltd. in Beijing. This intricate arrangement is the legal and financial embodiment of the compromise, allowing virtually all pre-crisis financial stakeholders to maintain some form of economic participation, while ostensibly removing the element of Chinese corporate control that triggered the national security crisis. The legislative backdrop against which this entire drama has been staged remains the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary-Controlled Applications Act of 2024. Its original, unmodified text presented a binary choice of stark simplicity: a full, bona fide divestiture of TikTok's U.S. business to a purchaser untainted by foreign adversary ties, to be consummated by January the 19th of the following year, or a comprehensive prohibition. The inauguration of President Trump to a second term on January the 20th, however, fundamentally altered the enforcement landscape. The new administration, through a combination of executive orders and directives to the Department of Commerce and the Attorney General, effectively placed the law in a state of abeyance, choosing not to initiate the enforcement protocols on the technical deadline thereby creating the essential political space for this alternative joint venture model to be finalized and presented as compliance. A subsequent presidential order promulgated in September provided the detailed security architecture for this model, mandating that TikTok as proprietary content recommendation algorithm, the crown jewel of its user engagement and the source of much of the intelligence value, concern undergo a process of retraining or re-baselining. This process is not merely a software update, but a foundational audit and reconstruction effort to be conducted under the constant vigilant supervision of the appointed U.S. security partners, with the explicit goal of ensuring its operations are verifiably free from any external manipulation or covert data exfiltration pathways. Ultimate command and control over this sanitized algorithm, along with its entire source code repository, will reside wholly within the purview of the new joint venture's technical leadership, physically housed on infrastructure located within the United States. The governance of the new entity further cements this shift with its 7-seat board of directors structured to guarantee American preponderance. Only a single director will be nominated by ByteDance, while the remaining 6 seats will be filled by individuals selected by the U.S. Investor Consortium and independent directors approved by them, thus creating a supermajority incapable of being overridden by the Chinese shareholders' representative. The role of Oracle within this ecosystem extends beyond that of a mere investor. It has been formally designated the Trusted Security Partner, a title imbued with profound technical and fiduciary responsibilities. In this capacity, Oracle will be contractually tasked with the physical safeguarding of all sensitive U.S. user data, the continuous real-time auditing of all systems for compliance with the agreed-upon security protocols and U.S. privacy laws, and the provision of the secure cloud computing environment, specifically Oracle's Generation 2 cloud infrastructure, where all American data will be domiciled, processed, and stored isolated from any other global TikTok data centers, and crucially from any potential access points subject to Chinese legal jurisdiction. The prevailing sentiment among a segment of financial and regulatory analysts, as exemplified by Craig A. Huber of Huber Research Partners, is one of cautious optimism regarding the deal's final ratification. Huber's assessment that he anticipates no significant regulatory impediments at this advanced stage is rooted in the observable fact that the most powerful figure in the executive branch, President Trump, has been intimately involved in shepherding this specific framework from concept toward reality. When the principal architect of potential enforcement is simultaneously the chief political advocate for the alternative solution, the path to regulatory approval becomes significantly less obstructed. This view holds that the various agencies, the Department of Commerce, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, and others, will ultimately align with the President's directive provided the final implementation adheres to the security blueprints they have jointly outlined. The journey of TikTok in America therefore appears poised to transition from a protracted political and legal conflict into a permanent experiment in hybrid governance, a case study in the complex trade-offs between global technological integration and the resurgent imperatives of the nation-state in the digital age. The platform's survival comes at the price of a radical corporate schism, a voluntary partition of its own technological stack and operational command, creating a uniquely American digital enclave governed by a boardroom in which Beijing's voice is legally marginalized but economically still present. This outcome, while allowing the vibrant community of creators and users to continue unimpeded, also normalizes a new paradigm where major internet platforms may be required to fracture along geopolitical lines, redefining the very meaning of a global technology company in an era of digital sovereignty and strategic competition. The story is no longer about whether TikTok will be banned, but about how this novel, contested, and precedent-setting structure of divided ownership and partitioned control will function in practice, and what it portends for the future of the open, interconnected internet that once defined the early 21st century.